So this is the essentially the what we are talking about is the see the it is first of all it's everything is going to be around this energy to the future, but this is a kind of a quick overview. We are thinking of the moving into the largest economy, and that is where I'm trying to see to the kind of a future how we are seeing. And the GDP growth, whatever we are seeing, it has come down, but average it is going to be above around 7 for sure. But the energy, if you see according to Planning Commission, the domestic energy production is about 9.6 million tons of oil. So it's not small. But what we are also seeing, the total installed capacity is 236 the gigawatts. The primary commercial energy consumption is almost from the coal and electricity, and what we are seeing is the substantial, at least about 80% of our total rural energy consumption is from basically from non-commercial kind of a thing. Really, you don't get much return on some of those things. And this number is also important. 55.3% of rural households are electrified. I think these are some of the numbers which indicates that typically what we are seeing is with the increasing demand and with the increasing population, we are always talking about the kind of gaps which is coming. And that is where the people have started seeing where are the sources. So what are the sources, what are the renewable, and what are the natural? So these kinds of issues are being raised now, even at the school level, high school level, so that we can increase the awareness of the people. First of all, what is sustainable and what is not sustainable. I think this discussion is extremely important, as I was saying, that the awareness is the fundamental thing when we are talking about the kind of changes what we expect in the society. The next one is the acceptance, and the third one is the commitment. So what we are really struggling in the management of change is bringing that kind of an awareness. At the one level, people think they are not bothered about the energy or the kind of the use of the energy. The second one is that we don't have an access to the energy at all. So particularly what we are talking about, the theme what DWIH suggested is that I speak not only about the future of energy, but also in the context of inclusive growth. So this inclusive growth really becomes very important when we are talking about the different kinds of energy. And also, who are these people when you are using the word inclusive? I think in India we use the words like Vanchit, Pidit, Shoshit and Drubal. So these are the kinds of expressions when we are trying to talk about what is this inclusive. So there are parts of the society they are really exploited, so they don't get an access to anything, and there are parts of the people that are pretty ignorant. Similarly, with the parts of the society they cannot afford. So there are many of these groups which are not considered when we are using this word energy or the consumption or the what needs to be done. And when these parts of the society, when they start moving into our use of this kind of an energy or the life comforts, so we suddenly see the aspirational economy, what some of the economists would describe, will convert that into either consumption or it will kind of contribute to the conflict. So I think all this Panchabhuta kind of a thing was mentioned, but again I have put this, to really see for anybody could be seen in terms of the electricity, the thermal, the solar. So there are different ways one can really classify and see what is available and what is important kind of thing. So today there is a lot of emphasis on the solar energy, as the tons of examples were given by earlier, the way the new buildings are coming up and the way people are trying to make use of this. Experiments are going on, but if you really see, there are some areas it has already made the impact of the difference. Particularly if you see the solar water heating, if you see in India, I think most of the houses I think they make it as a part of, or even at the time of construction itself. So people are seeing that kind of a benefits of those things. But if you see, are there any incentives? Are there any push? And that, if you see, there are missing links between the government, between the researchers. So still there are many gaps to make it. So make it very attractive so that people change and make it as a kind of a part of that kind of a lifestyle. And not only that, there are old buildings and there are buildings which really not meant for. So then there are required technologies to make it happen. Still it is in the, there are many people who describe it at a very nascent level. So when we are seeing that, the next part is, if you see the electric thing, so electrical energy, if you see, the 90% of it is used for the lighting, but people also have seen today for the pumping of the water. Substantial part of this energy goes towards, leave out the industrial use. But if you see the other agriculture and kind of a thing, so one need to see where are these demands are coming from. Are there the demands are pretty simple and or it is very unique? And we have a number of seminars and number of meetings, we talk about the use of the grid. So whenever the grid comes, then whether it should be a national grid, whether it should be local grid, whether it should be in a very small area, I think the questions need to be resolved. But getting into that kind of a debate, when you see there are many of these alternatives coming in. And you see the thermal energy, I think essentially we are looking at the coal-based. I think substantially the country depends upon the thermal, apart from this hydroelectric kind of a thing. So the thermal energy is always people are trying to map to the future. How many years we have, how many years we can. So the 2013 we are talking about another 2030, people are not able to map beyond 2017, 2018. So then the numbers you have to assume in terms of how much is the demand and how much the growth would be. So now the kind of a water is, so there are many small experiments in some of the hilly areas, some parts of the region where they could generate some of the electricity, particularly the Western Ghats, some of the Himalayan areas. But if you see, that is not really captured and encouraged. And there are some parts of the area where certainly you can do it. I saw in a couple of, closer to some of the German things where they have systematically they have used whatever available water, how can they convert that into? Some examples are also there in the Western Ghats where some individuals have tried to use the water and convert that into where they can generate just to sustain the local requirements. But if you see a systematic, a scientific approach to that, where forget about the bigger hydroelectric kind of a projects. In the future, we are not going to be able to do that because the land is becoming a scarce resource. Land also gets into a lot of politics from one state to the other, and also with other economic issues. And then the kind of this wind energy. So we are now talking about it. So and if you see, there are no business models around this wind energy. So if they generate energy, then where do they give? What rate is to be given? What rate if it is given by it is sustainable? I think these issues still to be resolved. So because that is how you see the growth is promising. People talk about it. But if you see in the reality, there is not enough. I think that's where the basic issues are. And what we are seeing is continuously, we are talking about the supply and demand, and then all the supply and demand, when you see that where are these gaps coming in, and so the kind of all this, if you see, each of these things can be mapped, and there are many of these studies are available. Even though it's so small, but you always see there is a gap in demand and gap in that kind of a supply. And if you see, substantially the gap is increasing. And what it was at So as you're going to see from 2017 to 2030, one should only expect that the gaps is going to be increasing further, and these things are seen. So there are, if you look at the data, yes, there is more and more supply side we are working. But if you also see that use of it, what I mentioned earlier, they only have that kind of a usage. There are more number of things to come, and then it is expected to grow between 10 to 12%, at least for the next 15 years. A rough estimate shows that anywhere that we are not going to supply that kind of a thing. The problem is there's demand, supply and gap is going to create the price differentials. There are some people who will be called as affordable. So they will pay whatever the price and then they will have it. So if you create a price kind of an intervention in this model to reduce the use of energy, so only some part of the society will make use of it. They will pay. They will pay and they will use it, but there will be a large part of the society will not get this and access to this kind of energy. And even if they want to use, that is how you see a lot of theft happening, and people try to get into the shortcuts to get over this somehow or the other. All these issues will come as we are going to get to this kind of a price differentials to the future.